Welcome. We're getting towards the end of Paris Fashion Week, but it's a pretty good show to be discussing. It's kind of where Paris Fashion Week flips on its head and everyone gets a bit riotous and excited because it's the Saint Laurent show, which is sure to attract a lot of attention. I've got an amazing set of panellists with me to help unpick the latest offering from Hedi Slimane, but I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack Tobin. I head up private shopping at matchesfashion.com.
Hi, I'm Rosanna Falconer and I'm Head of Digital at Matthew Williamson.
Hi, I'm Karl, Plewka, fashion stylist.
I'm Verity Parker, fashion editor at matchesfashion.com.
And I'm Richard Mortimer, I'm the editor of Pony Step magazine.
Let's start by talking a little bit about what we've seen at Saint Laurent over the past few seasons since Hedi Slimane was appointed there. Why has it attracted so much criticism? What do you guys think? I'll go to you first, Richard, because you were looking really like, please don't talk to me.
I just think it's so different to what everybody associated with Saint Laurent and what he came to embody. And I think Hedi is almost just doing Hedi. You know, it almost doesn't need to be under the banner of Saint Laurent. He could be doing it for any house. And I think with a house that has a heritage that's as rich as Yves Saint Laurent, I think people were a little taken aback by his changes. But then I also know on a more practical side of the business that he, you know, the work he does with the ateliers and stuff and the in-house stuff is much more structurally much more back to how it was when Saint Laurent was actually running the house.
It's interesting that you say it because I feel like the way he changed Saint Laurent and people kind of really interpreted that he was doing something incredibly revolutionary and quite disrespectful. You also have this camp that say actually he's taking like Saint Laurent back to its roots. You know, even with the name change, people have said that's what the ready-to-wear line was always called, or they've even sort of made the point that his sort of grungy aesthetic, if we can call it that, not to oversimplify, sort of corresponds with the codes of Saint Laurent, this kind of focus on youth culture, this focus on sort of making fashion more modern, more practical. So people have also kind of argued that maybe he's being incredibly respectful to the Saint Laurent house. Would you guys agree with that, or do you think that's
I totally agree with that.
Do you think?
I think that, you know, Saint Laurent was interested in anarchy. I mean, he did a collection in 1968 based on the riot on the student riots. No, but I know it's kind of, you know, it's like when you look at what Hedi's done, it's kind of I actually slightly disagree with Richard, only because I think that he has taken things and it could be perceived as being you know, as being disrespectful. But if you kind of think about the fact that Saint Laurent was interested in subversive things too, you can actually, you know, tie it up a little bit better, because I think that there's lots of things that you see that he's been doing for men, for example, the duffel coats that he put on women in the 60s, which were based on the student riots, and the fringing, and I think it's just probably been pushed to I think the styling of it has been pushed into quite an extreme place where people have probably been a bit, oh my goodness. And I think what happens is that a lot of the fashion writers and critics that have criticised it in a negative way, when they've actually gone and seen the clothes in the showroom, they've actually found them to be incredibly beautiful as standalone pieces. And I think that, you know, what we're actually seeing is a designer who is really questioning the idea of luxury, and I think that that's something really important right now, because not a lot of people are really doing that, or they don't know how to do it.
Would you agree with that, Verity? Is it a styling issue, do you think, that's caused such a lot of the kind of...
I think so, actually, because it's, as Karl said, you know, when you actually go and see those pieces, they are divine, they're really beautifully made. The cut is, you know, typical Hedi, you know, perfectly done for blazers, trousers, dresses, and the quality is there. So I do think it's the girls, it's the hair and makeup, it's the lighting of the show. I don't know what, you know, there are some things that definitely did rub people up the wrong way, and I don't think it's all down to the styling. I think, you know,
do you think
the small venues,
so
many things I think that I, you know, editorially I know have, you know, got people sort of going about it, but you know, it's an interesting one because it has caused such a stir for so many reasons, but you know, it sells hugely well, it's hugely popular, it appeals to so many people.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, Jack, tell us about how it sells.
Well, interestingly, like I hear it from both sides. So it's like the editorial side, all my friends that, you know, in the fashion pack that kind of don't speak that highly of it. But then I hear the client side, and that's been nothing but positive. So they just see the pieces, they're not looking at the styling or looking at it from a fashion point of view, and they love it. And they're always saying things like, we're hearing comments like, oh, it's so much younger and cooler now. Before it got a bit fuddy-duddy and a bit old, and it's definitely attracting a new client as well. I think but he has managed to be quite commercial in holding on to some of the original clientele, because we're still seeing that as well, because you see the younger, grungier pieces that people can buy into, and then also there's the pieces that are suitable for, the fans from before, the long gowns and things like that. So, I think from a client perspective, it's really popular, and they're looking at the pieces, aren't they? Not the whole look, or not the hair and makeup and the whole thing.
Rosanna, tell me a little bit about what we're seeing from the output from the brand in terms of digital stuff, because we're seeing a lot sort of with films, we're seeing a lot. What do you think of how...
He released a film on Days Digital, I think as a kind of exclusive premiere at the beginning of September. And it was shot in black and white, beautiful soundtrack, and it was for the new dance line. And it just had kind of one of his typical, very slim girls dancing in a kind of raw space. It captured the brand, his version of Saint Laurent perfectly in 2 minutes, and that's exactly what a fashion film should achieve. And I do, on their other, the way they use Facebook and Twitter is not the way I suppose ideally brands should be using Facebook and Twitter. You should be trying to interact, trying to engage. It is so on brand. Everything is written in capitals. They are just putting out their content exactly as they would like it to be consumed, and it does seem very kind of, it matches the exact rigour and rules that the PR team put in place before Hedi's first show, which was so shocking at the time. But yeah, you see a tweet from them and it's immediately recognisable, if nothing else, just because of the way it uses forward slashes and capitals. So they know the brand inside out, and they know what they want to put out there, and they certainly do.
Do you think that's part of what's rubbed the fashion pack, as you referred to it, up the wrong way, this real sort of attempt to control? He doesn't give interviews after the shows, he's very sort of closed off in some ways. As much as they're out there on Facebook and Twitter, it doesn't feel like they're inviting people to comment.
No, exactly. Yeah. And actually, I think, your first question about why there was such controversy, I think he was courting that controversy before the first model even went down the runway in the first show. And I wonder if it's going to progress and change, because just like we said in the Marnie panel, social media, it's social. You have to show that you're inviting the opinions of your fans, and it seems a little bit, rather like Imran from Business of Fashion said, that they're not really catering to a digital age and thinking about this digital age that we're in.
But they use it as more of like a communication thing as opposed to like an inviting.
Exactly.
But that's kind of also quite refreshing in a way, when everybody else is so kind of looking for comments. And do you know what I mean? I think there's something quite direct about it. It's quite, for me, that makes you sort of respect them a bit more, because it's less diluted.
There is too much access to designers nowadays. Yeah, definitely. And that can mean you lose that aspect of luxury fashion. But
it's like Slimane putting up a sign outside the show saying no one can use social media from the show, which I wonder, are you allowed to do it from the Saint Laurent show?
Yeah, people have been.
You are. Yeah. Okay.
Do you guys agree with what Rosanna said, that Hedi was courting controversy? Do you think that that's the case, or do you think?
I think he's just doing what he wants to do. I mean, I can't second guess what he wants to do, but I just think really it's divided the fashion press. I think a lot of people, no disrespect to fashion writers at all, but I think a lot of fashion writers have been outraged more than stylists, because I think what he's given stylists is an amazing choice of things to use for shoots that you can make your own. You can create a shoot around around an idea that you have, and bring these pieces in, and they'll work in many different stories.
They're surprisingly versatile, aren't they?
Exactly.
For what people dismiss as just grunge, it's actually a lot more versatile.
Yeah, and I think that that it's not necessarily on trend. It's not it's not courting what a lot of writers want a fashion collection to be, and so therefore I feel that it's probably and also putting people in third row seats when they're used to first row. I mean, that to me, I get it, because I know how precious that status is to a lot of people, and how much that they are pissed off about suddenly losing their status. But also it's like you have to understand that we're moving forward. It's a different pecking order now, and it's not necessarily that interesting where you're sat at a show. It's how it should be more about the show rather than where you're sat in the show. And I think that I'm really interested in what he's doing. I think he's one of the most exciting designers, and that's why who cares.
Let's talk a little about the menswear. Did you guys have a chance to see that? Because there's quite a lot of furore about the models he used, which is something we've seen consistently with his work. People have been kind of, especially about how thin they are.
But he needed to have thin models for that silhouette. It wouldn't have worked on anyone else.
But that thin?
And but you know what? They're not even models. They're mostly in bands. It's like these guys are naturally thin. I'm so over this whole thin
as
thing.
Well,
it's like if you put that high-waisted silhouette on anyone who didn't have that body shape, it would look absolutely awful.
But
and
how
so
does it sell
there's a reason
so well
for
then
it.
if it's so?
Because they have a really good atelier, and they know how to scale the sizes to keep the same proportion. That's quite obvious when you go and look at the clothes in the shop. So that's also a sign of a great luxury brand when they can put the clothes on a super skinny model in a show, and the proportion works on a normal shaped body when they buy it in the shop. That's very important, and that's one thing that Saint Laurent is really, really good at doing. If you go and look at the clothes.
Do you agree with that, Jack? Do you think that?
Well, apparently the whole concept is supposed to be that they're interchangeable anyway. But there's women that are buying from the menswear pieces anyway. So I think that's a whole quite clever idea that it's not just strictly menswear, strictly women's wear. And the cut, that's right, that the cutting is done in a way that I've seen it on bigger framed men and it still looks very good. It is slim fit, but it still has a very nice line to it, and it is scaled up appropriately. It's different for how they cut it, obviously, for the pieces specifically for the catwalk. But what's interesting about him from a commercial angle is that he's one of the very few brands at the moment that sells really well across all product categories. So he's managed to really, some brands, like Celine, for example, the ready-to-wear doesn't really sell so well, and it's all about the accessories. The bags just fly off. But Saint Laurent is really nailing it with the shoes, the bags, the ready-to-wear. It's all selling equally well across all product categories. So, and that's a real achievement in itself. He's obviously doing something right.
Is the fashion simplistic? Often it's a flyaway criticism that people make when they see the shows. They say, oh, it looks like Topshop, it looks like River Island. We heard that a lot, especially with the second collection. They did that grungier thing. Is it because the fashion is quite simple? It's not challenging to wear. It's quite.
I don't think it is. That was one thing when I did the last Saint Laurent panel, and that really kind of bothered me when everyone was saying it looks like Topshop, because it was just because of the styling and just because of it was on this very young model. And when you actually see those pieces, they're really special. There's no comparison at all. There really isn't.
So why style it to look like that then? Do we not find that quite bizarre? Is this about him trying to make a point?
I found it quite bizarre because you're right. I have seen it up close, and he's actually achieving what Saint Laurent wanted to achieve kind of in his final years at the house. He wanted to find the perfect tuxedo jacket, the perfect wide leg trouser. He is actually achieving through those individual pieces in the last collection the absolutely perfect leather jacket that will last you
years.
But
he's also dressing his friends, isn't he? Saint Laurent dressed Betty Couture.
I was going to say
that
the styling for me when I saw it, I was a bit shocked because I just didn't find it. I think because I'd seen it before, but I'd also seen it a few years ago, it felt like backtracking. Yeah. But maybe that's just me. Maybe it's because we live in London, we see it more often than, I don't know. It threw me. But then on seeing them up close and once it's that, there's obviously a reason behind it.
But he's being disrespectful with his own things. I mean, he's taking the most beautifully made dress and shoving shoving a plaid shirt over the top of it, and so he's also disrespecting his own work in a way, and to make it look how he wants it to look.
It's like an anti-luxury statement,
exactly.
Isn't it? Which is what he's so about that.
And Saint Laurent himself was about that.
Yeah.
But it is fundamentally luxury, which is really interesting because a lot of designers couldn't cope with that. They couldn't cope with the idea of that. It wouldn't be possible for them to do that.
Let's talk about that anti-luxury because I feel like while it's done in such an irreverent, sort of in-your-face way at Saint Laurent, it's also a trend we're seeing kind of coming through in fashion in general, whether it's with, we're seeing a lot of logo mainly, but we're also seeing really small logos. We're seeing stuff that looks a bit more grungy, but is really luxurious. And I think especially through that minimal period we had, that was almost anti-luxury. It was sort of nameless luxury. Why has that become such a thing? Anyone can answer that because it's a tough question.
Well, I don't really, I was doing so-called grunge fashion shoots at the beginning of the 90s with Corinne Day, and when I look at what people consider grunge now, I mean, French Vogue have got the September issue was Fever of Grunge or something. I don't see what's grungy about that. I don't get it. I mean, I get what they're doing. What Hedi's been doing is like this kind of, you know, Kurt Cobain, Courtney Love. That was kind of grunge from a music Seattle perspective. But what I considered to be grunge from a fashion point of view was very different to that. It was, you know, it was the Face magazine, it was ID magazine, it was, you know, it wasn't that look. So I see it more as a grunge look from a music perspective, from that kind of whole Seattle thing, I'd say.
I think people get confused between grunge and punk.
Yes.
I think there's a really strange thing about that, and I think that's also partly a high street thing where they've simplified it to make it, you know, clearer. So it's basically punk t-shirts, army shirts, minimal slip dresses are all the same thing, and actually they're really different. If you think referentially about music and about the eras, it's all quite different. 80s, 90s, 70s, you know, it's actually quite a wide spectrum. And I do think that is the high street that have just sort of combined it all into one. Sure. And I think that's why the Topshop reference was made about the Saint Laurent, because actually they do a really good job of ripping off all that original stuff to make it look a bit cheap. So actually Hedi was trying to do more of an original version that people have simplified it to think, oh, it just looks like Topshop.
What do we think of when high fashion kind of takes youth group, youth culture type references and works with them? What do we think of that? Do we find it, some people, we've had, you know, we saw that a bit with punk when people said it's not authentic at all when high fashion does punk, you know, quite a lot.
Like at the Met Gala.
Yeah.
When everyone's interpretation of punk has nothing to do with punk.
Well, yeah, and the Donatella, like, Bunk collection. Yeah, people get quite annoyed when people sort of, like, plunder youth culture. Do you guys find that annoying? Hello.
I think if you do it with integrity, you know, Hedi is really connected to musicians. He's also a photographer. He has this real cultural repertoire, and he obviously he knows. It doesn't feel like he has researchers at his studio who go out to Camden Market and research and maybe take some snaps for him. It's not contrived. He's genuinely in there and experiencing it. Yeah.
Let's talk about that link between fashion and music, because we've all kind of mentioned this, and I'm actually really interested in why fashion has such an exciting relationship with music. And also we've talked a little bit on panels recently about who's influencing fashion, and we said how blurred that's become. You know, we had a guy on our panel yesterday, Tremaine Emery, and he said, you know, you don't really look at acting people and call lots of them style icons, but you do with music. And why is there such a thing between fashion and music? Maybe that's good for you, Richard, at a magazine like Pony Step.
I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I do really respect Hedi's dedication to music. I mean, I've seen him many times at gigs just on his own and stuff. But I think, I don't know what it is with musicians. They're just somehow just so much cooler than actresses, and I don't know what it is.
Do you think it's because they can reinvent themselves? You know, that's part of what being a musician is, like from album to album, from tour to tour.
I think it's because they care now so much about their image as well, but mind you, I think they've always cared about their image. You look back at early Bowie and stuff, even the Rolling Stones. I think they've always been much more image conscious than actors and actresses.
And less self-conscious probably as well.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, because I mean, the bands that he's working with, they're not turning up with 10 publicists and you know, telling you can't put on this, you can't put on that, you can't wear that. It's like.
But then isn't there a contradiction? Maybe this goes back to some of the earlier questions I was asking about that kind of liberated, young, exciting side of Saint Laurent, using those young kids, embracing sort of these young musicians, but then being so sort of prissy in how you conduct yourself, like refusing to give post-show interviews? Or do you think? Does he genuinely just not really care?
I mean, if I was a designer, I wouldn't want to give a post-show interview. I mean, why would you want to? If you didn't have to, don't do it. I mean, apparently, I've been backstage at fashion shows after, you know, it's a lot of designers are really, really not wanting, they just want to be anywhere but. You can see it all over their face. They're not happy to be there. It's probably the worst time for a PR to allow a designer to be interviewed, because they've been up for 5 days, they're tired, they're not interested. So I think it's pretty good that he doesn't want to do that, you know.
Do you guys agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think it almost gives him more credibility, or any designer that doesn't. It's those kind of designers that really want to court that. I think of like the D Squared twins or something like that. It's just
Karl
like,
Lagerfeld. But I mean,
it's just,
clothes
just like annoying. You know, they'll love it. They're like, get the cameras in, get the cameras on me. It's almost a bit like, you know, no boys, stop.
Do you think maybe that's why he has riled people up the wrong way, and it kind of does undermine the fashion pack in a way, because it feels a little bit to me like the criticism that he's had is actually less about the clothes. It's more people are annoyed that he's not playing along to the fashion system, which they like to maintain because it sort of bolsters their egos. Do you think there's a bit of that he's kind of undermined everyone a bit, and they're
definitely
because they lose their authority, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, it's like they want to think that they're connected and they've got the first word from Hedi and blah blah blah, and actually he's sort of saying not at all, and then they have to admit that actually then without that they don't have maybe as much to go on as they would ordinarily.
Next thing we know, maybe he'll start showing outside Fashion Week. He'll be the one
Like a
to
liar.
break
Like
the
a
hamster
liar.
wheel.
Yeah.
Well, he does feel like he's the only person that's kind of really upturning fashion. You know, we see a lot of revolutionary collections and exciting new endeavours, but in terms of genuinely like pissing off the fashion pack.
Well, I was
he's the only one.
backstage at a show recently in Paris a few days ago, and from one of the biggest fashion websites had a journalist backstage talking to the designer after the show, and she was so miserable, this woman, and so determined to be a cow. I was like, I wouldn't want her anywhere near me after a show if I was a designer and I put my heart and soul into this. So I totally get it. I mean, you know, everyone's got a job to do, but you know, everyone has their own right to do it how they want to do it. And why should you be available to people if you don't want to be?
I think it's also that he's quite unavailable even outside the show, though. Yeah. He's done an interview with Vogue, the September issue of American Vogue, and then he spoke to one of the culture journalists at The Guardian last week.
That piece was the culture. It's Alex Needham, isn't it?
Was that not really an interview? It was
he's old friends with Eddie from
so
like music stuff. So the piece, it's a really great piece actually, but it's quite sort of like my friendship with Hedi. That's kind of the focus of that. But it was an interesting piece. I thought
it was great. So maybe that's also the other thing. It's not just after the show when you're absolutely exhausted. But it's throughout the season.
But I think it's also quite interesting to see that Eddie is really handpicking the young titles that he wants to shoot for as well. He's not going in and just shooting for every big title. He's really specific about picking new, young, independent talent.
He did the cover of Hero.
He did that whole portfolio. And initially, that was meant to be a whole Saint Laurent special. And then they got on the shoot. He was like, "These clothes aren't going to work. Let's have some integrity about this story, and let's just shoot an amazing portfolio." And I think that's what's really great about Eddie as well. That he always has integrity in every aspect of what he does.
So do we all agree with that? Because I think a lot of people say that he's got this big ego, he's a bit of a poser, but are we actually all agreeing that he's very authentic in what he does?
I think so.
If you
I think
meet him, he's not like that at all.
Yeah, he's not like that.
He's not at all.
He's very quiet and friendly.
Yeah.
I think it's quite an easy assumption to make, if someone's quite elusive, to just suddenly put that, you know, on them.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, it's nice that a designer isn't so accessible. I think we've kind of gone through an era maybe where designers are too accessible, and it's about the clothes and what they're creating.
I think the difficulty is that much publicised Twitter rant with Cathy Horan. I think that's part of the issue, because I really agree with what you guys are saying about how he's kind of really chilled out, he's just doing something that feels authentic, he's really into music. But then we did see him have like a full-on meltdown on Twitter, which kind of suggests more of an ego there.
And I think also we've got to remember that he has taken the helm of Saint Laurent, which is one of the most famous houses in the world. And, you know, if he does want to be under the radar, he could have just gone quietly and done his own brand. But we've got to remember, you know, he has taken this house. And I think with the house comes that notoriety.
And he also has the support of Pierre Berger, who is the partner of Yves Saint Laurent in several ways. And, you know, that's another thing, like people, you know, who cares what certain magazines or writers say?
Yeah.
You know, he's got the support of Pierre Berger,
But do you
saying
not think
he should be allowed to do what he wants.
I think it's such a good point that Richard just made. Do you not think, you know, it's not like Eddie's just doing his own thing. He has taken on one of the most iconic houses in fashion. Do you not think with that comes a certain amount of responsibility as the designer? It's not just about the clothes when you're head of a house.
Of course it does.
But I think he's accepted that responsibility. He makes what he thinks and what many people think are beautiful clothes. They sell super well, they're making money, they do beautiful campaigns.
Yeah.
You know, I think
Let's talk about the campaigns. Are they beautiful campaigns?
Well, he thinks they are.
That's very diplomatic.
Which one are you talking about?
I like them actually.
Well, what did you guys think of when we saw like Marilyn Manson, Courtney Love?
Love it.
I
Loved
love
it?
those, yeah.
What did you think?
I
I really hope we get a close up of your face.
thought it was very brave. I mean, I'm just a I'm a huge fan of like the old romantic, sexy Saint Laurent, but I don't know. I just for me, I didn't connect with Marilyn Manson being the face of Saint Laurent. I didn't know. I didn't think it was relevant enough now. Daft Punk, I completely got. Even Courtney Love, I got it. But some of them, I just thought, I don't get this connection.
Do you guys agree that some were good choices, others?
But it's almost about like trying to kind of like forget what went before, though. That's the difficulty that he has, because I didn't actually love them, but I do love the fact that it's really true to his manifesto and true to the aesthetic of everything through and through. So imagine if you were, you know, someone young that didn't know all of the, you know, wasn't a fashion follower, but you just loved buying clothes, and you saw that, you would just think that was Saint Laurent, you know, and that was what you knew now. It's only because we know too much.
I thought Marilyn looked very chic.
But do you not think Marilyn's kind of done? I think that's it.
That's why you love that he does it, because he's like, I don't care if anybody thinks he's done. I think he's great.
I thought he looked like a new version of Marilyn. I thought he looked like he'd been Saint Laurentized.
But I think that underpins a lot of the criticism of Saint Laurent is that there is a sense of familiarity to it. So as much as we're saying he's going in his own way, doing what feels authentic, there is a truth in the fact a lot of what he puts out, both in his campaigns and also on the runway, there is a sense of seeing it before, and in a flippant way seeing it before on like 17-year-olds.
That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Is that? Do you think so? Do you think that's fine?
Yeah, because I'm looking at designers doing things, trying really hard to do new things, and you just would never wear it.
And it doesn't work.
I mean, who would wear?
Credibility.
I mean, all these like designers that are doing like kind of so-called modern clothes, you know, with really graphic prints and awful, awkward, you know, silhouettes. You know, and funny proportions. No one can wear those clothes. Honestly, I mean, who wants to dress like that?
Is he about clothes, not fashion? Then?
Yeah.
I think what I find a bit difficult about the campaign, you know, the one with Cara, and I think it's shot beautifully. I love the perspective of the photograph, and exactly, it does kind of really hit. It's very resonant with his manifesto, but she just. The girls on the runway and her, they look very girlish, and I feel that fashion at the moment, it's more about celebrating a woman, and Yves himself he gave, I think there's a quote, something like Coco Chanel gave women style and Yves gave, maybe that's not right, but the whole point was that he gave women power, partly through dressing them in this kind of masculine aesthetic, and some of the looks do look quite girlish.
Youthful. Especially, you mentioned some of the films he's done. You know, he's done a new one for the ballet pump shoes, and it is literally like a little child, and it's very girlish. But I think girlishness is having a bit of a moment.
Well, when he did the 40s collection, Saint Laurent, people were really shocked by that because it looked like prostitutes. And I think that's probably what he's tapped into quite a lot, particularly in the last collection.
Should we see what he's done for this season? We're doing it from images because he doesn't stream, and it's Hedi opening it. What are our thoughts?
We had different reactions, which was interesting, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I kind of want to move on, I think, into the show.
So we're not going to talk about that.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably, there's, you know, it's an opening outfit. I don't really know.
I love how you're like, I will not criticise that.
Yeah,
just describe.
I don't think it's probably, what we're looking at, everyone should know, is not a film, so I don't think it's necessarily the best picture of this outfit on this girl.
But I do think that will be a strong piece.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think you'll see it everywhere.
Yeah.
But you don't look at it and think, oh, gorgeous.
But I think
when you actually have it in your hand, it probably is incredibly beautiful fabric. And from this, I can't tell what the fabric is, if it's in, you know.
But I think again, this is the thing about Saint Laurent. I think when you see the pieces, I don't often like the way that it's styled and it looks on the runway, and I'm always really amazed when you're on a shoot and you pick things up and you're like, oh my god, what is this? And it's Saint Laurent, it's amazing. Or you put it on a girl and you're just like,
no, you're right.
It looks like nothing on a hanger, but you put it on, you're just like, that's amazing. And I just think often with the styling of the runway show, you just don't get that.
You miss stuff. It goes back to what you were saying as well, Verity. I think that opening look about the versatility. So you can see that actually styled in incredibly different ways, and that is quite exciting when you get that proposition.
But I think that is why it sells as well a lot, I think.
Of course. Different ages,
and it's what you said about people, it mixes with old Saint Laurent fans and newer...
And a younger client as
Do you find that they don't do you get a lot of Saint Laurent shoppers who come in just wanting head to toe, or is it more people dipping in and out of key pieces?
No, it's not really head to toe. It's like key, because all the pieces are so desirable when you see them.
Yeah.
So it's like people just love a piece. It's not really like head to toe looks. I don't think I've seen that once.
Which is interesting, given that it's such a concise view that he's putting out there, that actually it's identifying shoppers who just want to dip in and out. That is
I don't think the woman that he's targeting is someone who wears a head-to-toe designer look from one designer anyway. You know, that's not. It's, you know, it's Kate Moss. It's Alison Mosshart. You know, they're not head-to-toe in anything.
Just to give you guys a bit of background on the show, so the invite has the monochrome artwork of Guy de Cornet on it, and it's obviously at the show. The music at the show is Mr. You're on Fire, Mr.
Which means nothing to me.
No, me neither. Which is by Angus, Andrew, and Hedi opened, as we just saw. So obviously, again, as much as championing the young musicians, he is championing the young artists, which is something that doesn't get as much press, I don't think.
Is that the DVF
I was just
in a
about
whole
to
new way?
I knew that you
Let's
beat me
go
to
back.
it. I was just about to go
DVF.
dress.
There we
What's that doing
go.
on there?
It's a DVF collaboration with
I
Eddie
think
Slimane.
it is. No, obviously it's not. It's
It's quite a
An
40s
interesting
neckline,
cut.
so we're wondering if it's a little bit of the 40s collection.
But again, it's one of those pieces that you can see that actually on, like, I think that's quite a celebrity look. I can see that on lots of celebrities on the covers of magazines, and it's super flattering. That's quite actually, it's super short, but I imagine.
I was going to say, it's more like a wrapped shirt though, really, isn't it? 'Cause it's so short.
And I love the shoulders
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
and the print. I like
I
it.
love that.
I like it too. And he always does a really eclectic running order. It's never about
Yes, that's true.
5 dresses
Yeah,
in
yeah,
different
yeah.
colours, you know, which I like,
Yeah,
because it
me
keeps
too.
you on your toes.
But can we just discuss his casting?
Yeah.
It's sometimes a bit all over the place, isn't it? Sometimes you're looking and you're like, geez.
Well, I was talking about the menswear before, and I do find it a bit like we had Richard Gray from Sunday Times Style on when we did our roundup of the men's for Paris, and he was like, oh, he's putting across a new vision of beauty, which I actually think is a really interesting point. You know, we're all so astounded by it because it does look so shocking to us, but I think there is a responsibility for a designer to cast like with a degree of sort of realization of the position they're in, and I think with the menswear, it just those models look so unhealthy.
But also
It bothers
he
me.
literally
Yeah.
went out on the streets and looked for boys
Yeah.
who met that aesthetic. He didn't go through a model costume.
And the thing about him is his position in the industry is he can have whoever he wants for this show. He can have one
Do you not
model
think that's
per
more
look.
shocking? And why cast
No,
a
because
boy
I
who
think it's
looks
quite
like they
good
have an
because
eating
he's
disorder?
having people that he's inspired by.
I thought they looked great. I mean, they looked so weird.
Yeah, they did look so
But I
weird.
was like, it worked.
They're a bit unearthly weird, which
Really
is...
unearthly.
Yeah.
Also, I think you've got to presume that people are intelligent enough to think that you don't have to look like that directly to wear that stuff. You know, you can have your own mind about it and sort of see
Yeah.
that as the influence, and
Exactly.
then dress how you want to dress and take that as your inspiration and
Yeah.
break it down and buy a coat, wear it with your vintage
Yeah.
Levi's. You know, you don't have to look like a 15-year-old kid that hasn't eaten for a week.
Dior's last collection, Saint Laurent's last collection at
Freudian
Dior.
there.
You're forgiven for
A little bit
saying
too
that.
much
He was there,
champagne.
you know.
No, but Saint Laurent's last collection at Dior in 1960, he got criticised by American Vogue, being like, they had ghostly pale faces, these clothes just look completely unwearable. Why would women want to spend their money on clothes that it was very street influenced, that looked like they could just be from the street? And
I guess
Yeah.
it goes back to that thing of kind of non-luxury luxury, because the boys, I don't think any of those boys looked aspirational. They looked kind of like kids you would see on the street,
Yeah.
and whereas models are all about looking otherworldly, but in
A good way.
a good way,
Yeah.
not in this kind of like, ugh, feed him and take away his syringes. Kind
I
of
would
way.
always, I mean, I get using people that aren't male models. So I find male models quite uninspiring a lot of the
Yes.
time.
I do
quite
not.
frightening.
And I think that people who look like they've just got out of bed, who are in a band, are much better
Yeah, I agree.
for this.
So what do we think? What do we think of the 5 looks of the collection we've seen so far? Shall we keep skipping? I think it's quite. I love seeing him do tailoring. Ooh,
It's a bit longer, isn't it?
yeah. Well,
a little bit bummer about 3 years ago.
that's
See, these are all
Love.
very Betty, these
I love
silhouettes, the
Yeah.
masculine
But I love
ones.
it, yeah. It's
Yeah,
so
these
good.
seem
Yeah.
like the development I would expect from the last two.
Yeah.
and based on also the menswear, this feels very authentic to what we saw at the men.
Yeah.
But maybe you guys can elaborate. How do these translate into working on real women? So when these actually hit the store and they're actually in normal sizes, how do they fit?
Well, we were having this conversation. Basically, what it is, they've got the atelier are really they're really good at changing the.
Do they actually adapt them?
The scale of
The
the
scale.
sizes, and they work on it so that they keep the same proportion in the clothes for normal people. It's not as extreme as you see it on the runway.
But would that come lengthened, for example? Is it as...
Probably, like, everything will have tweaks to make it more commercial.
Yeah.
So and everything's going to get graded as well. But this has probably all been fitted for a catwalk model, and then they've probably got an in-house fit model. But it is slim fit, so I'm not going to lie. It's not going to encompass. This is not the brand's go-to if you're a big curvy woman.
Like, I tried on a dress and I couldn't have worn it. You could it was indecent.
I have there's been criticisms about the cut of the trousers and things. Some people say they're so ridiculously narrow, like no one can get into them.
You can't get your foot in.
And it is the same, I think, with the menswear as well. Like, I'm super slim, and like I actually can't get into Saint Laurent, which is like a bit worrying. So I'm like, who is it for?
What can't you get into?
The trousers. They're
really?
Like, they're too. You've got to have to be like nothing to get those trousers.
So they'd fit you at the waist because the ateliers go.
Honestly,
I bet you can.
Honestly, I can't.
But you can't get into the jeans.
I've tried. No one can get into those jeans.
You can't say
I just jumped to a very great height.
And here I'm here to go through. No, I
there's
honestly
three sizes.
Don't know.
There's skinny. There's three sizes of jeans. There's like super skinny, then there's slim, and then there's regular. There's no way you can't get into the slim and regular.
Trust me,
really?
I've tried.
We'll do a
and
matches road
trip. Yeah,
trip.
we'll do. If someone could whip a pair out now, I'll try.
You're trying the girls' ones on.
No, honestly, I can't.
To go back to Richard's question, you did say before it isn't just super slim girls coming in to buy it.
No, it's not. But again, so this is like a tailored slim fit brand. So it's not going to encompass it's not the go-to brands like for curvy women, but it is graded really well. So it does, it goes up to a 14, and is going to look great still. So you don't have to get over what you're seeing on the catwalk.
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking more about accommodating breasts.
Yeah.
Because all these girls are pretty flat chested.
And in the fashion film from earlier in September, it almost looked like the girl had her boobs strapped in and bound.
It was such
and I just wonder how that affects a customer buying this.
But you've got to remember as well, they have a full commercial collection as well. So it's the catwalk things that maybe people buy, but then also there is a full commercial collection which you don't see until you go to the showroom appointment. Do you know what I mean? So actually, I don't know if they're cut that differently or not because we shoot the samples. But
the older, curvier women who are they buying the actual clothes or are they buying into the accessories?
I think, it's easy to say that, but I think actually not necessarily. I think they are still buying the pieces. Not everybody feels restricted as well, like that they have to do a certain style just because they're a bit curvier. Like I said, this is a brand that is selling across all categories, which is amazing. Like to manage to achieve that for a brand is very difficult. Like somebody like Stella again, like isn't really so much for her handbags because obviously she's got the leather issue there and like doesn't that's not her strongest category. Her ready to wear is, but like this is a brand that's really across all areas.
What do we think of this collection so far from what we've
seen? That's very much like a silhouette from the men's collection.
Yeah.
So I like the way it's crossing over a little bit, and I like the way that the men's is influencing the women's rather than the other way around.
Well, there's a new kind of androgyny to it, where the guys that he uses are so sort of effeminate in some ways.
Well, he had girls as well, didn't he, in the last show?
Love that.
Me too.
And I think it's kind of more than androgyny. It's like J.W. Anderson said, it's not that these women are trying on their boyfriend's clothes, it's that equally it could go the other way. It's just cross-dressing. But it's
which feels much more modern, I think.
Definitely.
So therefore it helps if you're both super skinny.
Yeah.
It's practical.
So the moral of the battle is everyone has to be really, really slim. No, but I do agree that I'm so tired of that like boyfriend aesthetic. It just feels really outdated. Like, sling on your boyfriend's top. Whereas this thing of like, you borrow his jeans, he borrows your jacket, you both wear each other's t-shirts.
Exactly.
Like, I don't think I'll ever find a man.
Yeah. He borrows your skirt, it's
he
fine.
just rocks this. Oh God, that'd be horrible.
I don't like sharing clothes, so I wouldn't do it.
No, I'm a bit too...
Have you ever shared clothes with your boyfriend, Rosanna?
Yeah, the sequins are his favourite thing for Saturday night.
But that does feel more modern. I find that more exciting. I can imagine that going in a new direction in fashion. I'm interested to see how that feels like the only taboo that's still in fashion is this like gender thing. We still show men's, women's. There are very few designers that show an androgynous collection, so it's quite nice to see a designer with such a huge
isn't that something that's very true to Yves Saint Laurent? Because I'm sure that's something that's been talked about before, that he kind of had a whole philosophy that was around unisex clothes, and he was somebody that he introduced ready to wear, didn't he? And then he introduced that concept of unisex. So I think that's quite true to it, isn't it? That whole idea.
Which goes back to what we were saying about it actually being quite true to to some of the codes of Yves Saint Laurent.
So really what we're saying is he should put a few male models in the next women's show.
But is it as simplistic as that, or should he just show clothes that can be worn on either gender?
Maybe just do a show for men and women like Helmut Lang used to do.
Yeah.
He's gonna tear up the fashion calendar. Like
You're
we were
really
saying
excited.
earlier. I think it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
She's got boobs.
She looks amazing.
Yeah,
I
she
love
looks
that.
awesome.
I mean, that's a 34A, B, isn't it?
A.
32B maybe.
But there's a boob there.
Tiny back and a boob.
We're going to play Spot the Boob now.
But also,
Oh, wow.
actually, sorry, can we just go back to that look before? Even though, regardless of her chest size, that look actually could be worn. Like, that's quite an easy look.
I
for
can't
a
work
woman,
it out.
you know.
Is it sheer? Because
Yeah.
if it's sheer,
Yeah.
well then is that an easy look? 'Cause she's
I
showing
think
her.
it's.
Because they sell the bandos to
Yeah, because they'll sell on top.
I've
so
seen
I'm
Corrine Rothfeld at a party with a completely sheer
Yeah.
black Yves Saint Laurent
But
blouse.
Karine
And Kate
Rothfeld
Moss pulls
is
it
not
off.
like everybody.
But she's a grandma, so it's fine.
Yeah. You just have to be confident.
And if they sell the bandos, so that top would be sold with a kind of slip or bandos.
I actually
on.
don't know, but Jack might.
Would it?
I probably doubt it that
Okay.
it would, but then
They
again,
have a
that's
flesh
just
lining.
a sheer top like that. It is easy to put a whole multitude of other things underneath
Yeah,
it.
so
Yeah.
it's quite good styling.
Or
Yeah.
wear it with a blazer over the
But
top.
think
and just
how,
have a
think how, you know
smile.
that Stella dress from, I can't actually remember what season it was, that had the spots like that with all
Yeah.
the colour.
Yeah.
Think how that was on everyone.
Everyone.
And that was on women who were.
But I think that's typical Stella, right? So she did
Yeah.
the bandeau top, so everything that should have been covered as a
Yeah.
woman was
But
covered,
you couldn't
and
wear any
that's all the
underwear with
flattering
it, so it was
bit.
still pretty out there.
Yeah.
I think sheer is quite. I never look at sheer and think that's something that only slim women can wear.
Oh, definitely not.
I think it's quite flattering.
I think it would look better half the time on curvy women. Yeah.
See that?
Silence.
No
at that.
I thought it was quite
Stephen
cool.
Sprouse, Debbie Harry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Debbie
I
Harry.
love that.
She's
I like
great.
the
I
girl.
think it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
and
the
I,
girl's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a cool
I'm
look.
loving the boots, and they nailed the perfect biker boot
Yeah.
for this season that's currently in stores,
I-
and it looks like they're.
I think
doing
she's
the same.
really CBGB's girl.
Yeah, she's
The
mega.
casting feels better this season. We said before it feels a bit all over the place sometimes, but this actually feels more on point.
But I kind of like the fact that it is sometimes a bit all over
you?
the place.
Me
Yeah.
too.
I guess it goes back to this idea that there isn't a Saint Laurent girl. It's more just about
Attitude.
powerful.
attitude.
It's
Exactly.
iconic.
You don't have to look a certain way.
We've got some ankle socks going on with the pumps now.
Or are they
Yeah.
attached to the shoes like the Valentino-esque things?
I think that's
Are they
styling.
socks?
I think they're soft.
I think they're
Yeah.
a cute sock.
Yeah.
That's not so good.
Yeah,
No.
that. Well, this is the thing. It's again that thing of we've seen it around London.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never even. It was more like my younger sister's friends
Yeah.
were doing it about 2 years ago.
But that's what
nice
people
for a
said
shoot.
about
I mean,
the,
you make it
Some
work.
silhouettes
Yeah.
look better when they're moving as well than they do when they're captured.
And the
in a
Saint
certain
Laurent
way.
models always kind of march with such.
But I quite like that. It
Vigor.
feels that he's
Yeah.
like mimed a vintage store. I quite like that. People said that about the men's. It felt like some of the pieces could have been from sort of beyond retro, and I think it's the same. That dress that we just saw on Hedi, that could be a vintage
But
dress.
the-
I think
the
that's something quite nice about
Yeah,
it.
and the
Yeah.
woman who's spending £4,000 on that's not going to go to
Beyond
Beyond
retro.
retro.
Beyond retro, exactly.
root around a dusty old box.
Coming out smelling of damn.
No, exactly. So he's doing a service. Boobs.
It kind of has
I love how we're on boob
I
watch.
want boobs, Michelle, thanks to you.
they are quite on show, aren't they?
She's got boobs.
But
It
shit,
kind
that's
of
a
does-
very Saint Laurent boob, isn't it? That's a very Betty
Yeah.
Patrouille.
Yeah,
I keep
yeah.
going back to her
But that
boob.
feels
Yeah.
incredibly Saint Laurent.
Yeah.
that look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the pieces, based on the collection that we've seen so far, what are the pieces that you can imagine doing best?
really well.
Yeah.
Well, what I was just going to say is that it kind of goes like being quite soft and fluid and like more girly, and then there's like a harder look, and then it's interspersed with
Yeah.
that look again.
Yeah.
I probably it's difficult to say because again it's all about the pieces, so it's kind of like a interchange between them all really, like how he's styling it.
Looks like Winona Ryder.
That jacket, like exactly, that will be beautiful when you see that up.
That,
Yeah.
that
The
would be
leather will
perfect
be so
leather jacket.
soft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What do we think of that bag? That to me is a bit of a surprise because the Saint Laurent, like I can't actually remember who I was talking to, but we were saying that the Saint Laurent accessories, they're
different to
incredible,
the-
but so,
yeah.
was it you? They're
No,
so
it was
different.
someone that we did the other panel with.
One of
No,
the
they were
panels.
saying that the accessories didn't necessarily match the collection.
They look very
which
bullet,
I don't
you can
think
almost
is
wear it with
necessarily a
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
thing, to be honest.
Yeah, but that's
because
very much like
who wants to
matches-
wear a bag that looks like the dress you're wearing?
Yeah.
I mean,
But
I think
do
they're
you not
really
think people want a
simple. The
band-
accessories, they're very kind of simple and
Yeah.
chic and.
But whereas that to me is so much. That's
Yeah.
not simple or chic. It's much more
No.
on point to the.
But you know, it's like when like Burberry or something, they do like a leopard coat and a leopard bag, and it's like
Yeah.
I don't know who wears that dresses like that.
I always match my.
No, you don't.
You're like, no.
See that I love her. That's
her.
McMenemy, Lily McMenemy. I think she's fantastic.
I love her.
She's gorgeous. To me, this is exactly what I was expecting. But is there something quite nice about that? Is it what you guys were expecting?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more grown up than I was expecting. I think it feels much more evening and.
Actually, yeah. There's no.
But it's
Given
almost
how
more
day wear
cutesy or
last
something.
season
Half of it's more, like a rah-rah skirt and all those sort of fuller.
But it's not like ripped jeans and like
Yeah.
jumper. This is very much like I'm going out to a really cool party.
But there's like a real contrast. That all the looks have contrasting elements to it. Like the one we just looked at before has a very like that. The top half to that is very kind of like sleek and evening, and then the bottom half is much more fun and girly and kind of a bit more, or like slightly more rock as well. And then the next look, the same again. We've got this kind of sheer blouse. That blouse on its own is going to be very elegant, and then it's like rocked up with that jacket, which is going to be like perfect jacket when it's hanging on the rail as well.
That's so good, that jacket.
But it's interesting that he's kept the same silhouette the high waist as in the men's collection.
Not quite as high waisted at the
No.
moment. Does that look painful on
Yeah.
the model? Do we like that he's doing this kind of manly look, female look? Do we?
I like it because it jolts the senses.
Yeah.
And I do find sometimes in a show when there's a narrative that runs throughout in a kind of really a kind of lovely development and gradation of colour, you get a little bit numb to it and they all start to blur into one, whereas this one it's like, oh hello. I mean, each time each of us are having real reactions. So.
Yeah.
It's a bit butch femme, isn't it? Throughout, which I kind of like.
I think Richard's point about this being a lot more evening is actually really interesting. I wonder if I wonder why he's gone, because last season was so day wear. It was so kind of as if she'd woken up in the morning. Maybe this is her going to what she was.
Spring summer always kind of like leans to that a little bit more though, doesn't
Do you think
it?
it's because it's so much more fleshy?
Yeah, I think the seasons just have kind of like lean towards a bit more evening or a little bit more day sometimes, but definitely like this feels that way.
But I think what Jack was saying earlier is that people tend to buy pieces of Saint Laurent and not full looks, and I think they might have bought one or two daywear pieces. Now they can actually go in and buy something evening, rather than going in and buying this.
Because he hasn't done that much evening-y stuff before. I wonder how much this is a commercial thing to take it in that direction, where you go to Saint Laurent now for like a nice cocktail frock.
Well, what's great about Saint Laurent is that he has a classic collection that gets repeated, so you don't feel like you're buying something and it's not working 6 months later or a year later. It's which I like. It's like
You still know it looks great.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, the dresses, the little, very short cocktail dresses, were kind of there last season, but they were covered with a workman's
plaid shirt.
jacket and a plaid shirt.
And lots of flats. Last season was a lot more of the boots. And
So again, it's that
fishnets
styling
and
thing that we're going back to, isn't it? It's really hard to look at these collections even just on a runway. I guess even whether you're there, whether you're looking at a video, whether you're looking from pictures, because it is just about the pieces. And as Richard said, it's when you go and touch them and feel them. And it's so styled. It feels like the message often comes from the styling, not from the actual clothes. Can we just go back to that look before? Because what
What is that?
What?
that is odd.
that's quite jazzy.
I just asymmetric hemlines just.
But you can see what they're doing with the styling. It's on its own it could be something completely different, that dress, right?
Are they leggings?
What are you going to say, Richard?
I just think we should just move on to the next one.
Just pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because then, I mean, look at that.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
great. But it was kind of, is it just a development on kind of 3 looks ago? There's this tux is coming back, and it's a nice little kind of pause between each of them.
Yeah, it's like a palette cleanser.
Yeah.
And also it goes back to the very first collection he did, which was a real, like the greatest hits of Yves Saint Laurent, with all that safari stuff and all the smokings. I like to, it's nice to see them again, because he does do that slim fit so well. We've got the baby doll
But even
again.
that baby doll is beautiful.
And the continuing thing that he's doing.
Yeah. And it is, I think this collection, I don't know if you guys would agree, for me this ties together the codes of Hedi Slimane with the codes of Saint Laurent really effectively. That smoking is so Saint Laurent, but it's also the slim fit is so Hedi Slimane. The baby doll feels really authentic to what Hedi does. So it's almost like he's starting to bring his codes together. And it feels like it makes sense. You're starting to, it doesn't feel as kind of, oh, what's this now? It's like Hedi's becoming Saint Laurent. It feels...
Well, I think he's made his statement now, hasn't
Yeah.
he? And I think it's really nice to see him putting some really strong tailoring back into the show.
Yeah, I
because that's
agree.
what everybody knows him for and loves him for.
Yeah.
And I think initially you really felt like he was rebelling against what everybody wanted from him, and it's really nice to see it becoming more balanced now.
Do you guys think that was a shame that kind of his skill as a designer, and particularly as a designer with the focus on tailoring, did get really sort of, I guess, overlooked given all that furore? And I guess that's not even his fault. You know, you said before, Rosanna, that he was courting controversy, but even from the very moment of his appointment and the same time that we saw the RAF appointment, it became this huge like battle of the boys. And
I think people, it wasn't, maybe not so much he was courting controversy, I think the press yearned for that. It was a story, the perfect press story, and really gave us the press something to talk about.
because I feel like people have moved on from how incredibly influential and how amazing his work was when he was doing his menswear.
He changed the way men dressed.
Was it him or was it Raf though?
Eddie Slimane changed the way men dressed. A lot of men, you know, he did when he was at Dior, definitely, without question.
But
So-
I don't think there's really a comparison between Eddie and Raf.
Completely.
I think on one hand Eddie completely changed the male silhouette, but I think culturally I think Raf subverted fashion a
Yeah, I
lot
think
more.
that's really true. So they're almost, it's a completely different thing, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
a different impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Would you
I
guys
don't
agree
think
with that? Yeah?
Well, no, I'm just thinking. I'm sorry. I'm looking at that, thinking I just love that look so much. But no, I think you can't even compare. I think they're two different designers. I hate the way everybody tries to pitch two talented
So
people
do
up
I.
against
Yeah,
each
so
other.
different.
We talked
You
about
know.
this so much in some of our panels. Why does fashion have this like obsession with just as someone's appointed, it's almost like they get one season and if it's not good, they're out. And I think it's really dangerous for fashion that no one's really allowed their time to kind of.
But again, it's fashion writers. It's not fashion. It's not stylists.
No, it's not
Basically,
editors and
no, it is because as stylists, you're happy when everyone does completely different things. Because
Yeah.
it gives you this massive walk-in wardrobe
lots
to
of
use.
stuff, yeah.
I hate trends. I hate the way that you're supposed to think it's great that Alexander Wang's done the same thing as someone. You know what I mean? I can't bear that. I think it's great when everyone does something completely different, like Marc Jacobs just did in New York. One of the best collections of the whole season.
Or Phoebe at Celine, that was so different.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. So
Yeah, love it or loathe it. It's different. Bit like Prada, but
So you were saying you love are you really enjoying the cocktail dresses?
I'm just thinking that it's kind of all about the leather jackets, isn't it? Like those leather jackets are going to be like the it item, the cocktail dresses and the tailoring, really, isn't it? It's like an absolutely amazing, impeccable tailoring.
that's pretty fierce,
amazing.
isn't it?
fantastic.
That's amazing.
I'd love to see that up close and see what that's made from.
So
And
there
how
is
it
actually,
Sequin or
moves.
something.
Yeah, exactly.
there is actually a real simplicity, as you
Yeah.
just pointed out. Like, as much as this feels quite confused because we're seeing like a men's look and then a cocktail dress, there is, as you say, it's the cocktail dress, it's a tailored suit, and it's a leather jacket and some nice ankle boots.
Yeah,
that's all
and
it
the
needs
ankle
to
boots
be.
change
Yeah.
colour every so often. And as we've said in so many
Love
panels
that.
recently, trends and the concept of them, even though they're very useful for us to be able to kind of box everything up nicely for the consumer, we're losing pieces are becoming more transitional. We're really losing seasons, and so trends as a concept. It's not like, I don't know, when I was at school and I used to think to myself, oh, next season I'm going to do this, and you really could. I don't think it's so easy to box nowadays.
But if you look at the collection as well, I think what he does so cleverly is tap into his younger clientele that are buying into Saint Laurent with no previous real knowledge of YSL,
Amazing.
and then he's like also retaining his older
His
clientele
older
as well, and
clientele,
you can see
yeah.
that in the looks, because some of these looks, if they're just
That
made a little
could
bit
be more
longer,
Saint
they'll be
Laurent,
fine.
Really.
It's
That is,
brilliant.
I want to see that on the red carpet. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
You will.
Yeah. I like that it's quite a conservative way of showing. I like that he's doing his evening wear kind of at the end. You know, we saw that bow tie there. We saw the longer dress.
Our DVF prints back.
Yeah.
That's an odd shoulder.
That's the last look.
It's like
Is
a
that the
pillow.
last look? Oh.
Yeah. I'm surprised by that.
Dinosaur.
Yeah, I'm
It's Julia. It's the last look.
Yeah, last look.
She's made it.
The shoulder is a bit bizarre on that. Actually, you know those pillows that you have on
An aeroplane.
on a flight or something. It looks like one half of that. It's just sort of like some stuffing on the shoulder.
Maybe he's thinking about comfort for the modern woman.
Possibly
who travels.
just one head.
There was a
logs one
picture of
side.
Rolf
It was the
collection where they
phone.
did that.
Yeah.
Integrated.
You know how you
Built
were
in.
telling us about when you did the Jill Sander collection, how well it travels? Maybe that's
Yeah,
what
maybe
this is
that's
about.
a whole new concept on it. Yeah.
That seemed quite short. Is it me or
It's 44.
44
was it? Oh God.
Maybe you're just time flies when you're having fun. You loved it,
I think we're
didn't
also
you?
absorbed.
Yeah.
It was
Everyone
much
seems
more,
quite
to be
impressed.
honest, it was much more positive this panel from last season, because last season it had quite a negative
But I
response.
think last season
That's 'cause I'm on
it was only the second season. But it's what Richard said, it feels like he's established himself now. I think it was tricky last season because no one knew what to expect, so you were almost a bit more affronted by it. And I think this is naturally more positive because we all knew kind of what we were going to get.
But also because it's leaning much more towards evening wear, though, you're associating it much more with Yves Saint Laurent, and it kind of seems more acceptable. Whereas last season was more day, and it was a little bit of like shock to the senses.
And also last season sat, I think, so awkwardly given what we'd seen from other designers that season. Whereas everything's been a bit more hodgepodge this season. So this maybe, I don't know. Would you guys agree? Like we've seen a lot of people doing things that are slightly curveball. Like yesterday, no one was expecting that from Phoebe Philo. So maybe we're a bit more accepting of everyone kind of doing something different.
And actually with Givenchy, again, it wasn't a curveball, but it wasn't, I feel like if this is the season, and we're all trying to avoid the word streetwear, but if this is the season when maybe people like Phoebe and we saw Marnie are starting to reference streetwear more, or kind of everyday wear maybe we should say, or in Phoebe's case rave, Givenchy had moved away from that and the kind of cutesy Bambi t-shirts. It was very fluid and felt like more of a kind of a timeless elegant look with beautiful draping. I think is everybody doing their own thing now?
What's that awful thing that they're pigeonholing fashion into at the moment? Gangs. I can't bear that. Tribes.
Style gangs, I know.
Why bother? It's like it's just clothes. Like them or don't like them.
You're like, fashion is just clothes.
It is. At the end of the day.
But is it just clothes? I don't know. I don't agree. I think fashion has such a huge cultural influence. It's not just clothes.
Eddie's the best
says
example
so
of that,
much
right?
more. What one person chooses to wear says so much more than just clothes. But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I think people spend too much time sometimes overanalyzing
Exactly.
things.
That's what I'm trying to
And
say.
it's like, who cares if they're doing that and they're doing that?
Do you think that's the seasonal thing? I think it's really interesting you say it's just clothes, because I wonder if, because we see so many collections, it makes us kind of like, that's just clothes. And should we think more in terms of, okay, so let's look at the 6 seasons that Hedi Slimane's done or whatever, let's look in 10 seasons and see what that says about culture, rather than trying to do that so obsessively every season. Do you think that's part of the problem? And it lends us to being like, oh, this is just clothes, because we're kind of so tired of having to unpick something deep in each collection.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I read a piece the other day where some writer said the show was lit like in a German expressionist movie, and I was like, really? Are you
How amazing
joking?
of them,
What are you? It's just showing off.
Yeah.
I mean, just write about the clothes.
It is. It's like over-articulating something
I know.
for the sake, because you're a journalist. I
Yeah.
think there is a lot of that.
There's
does.
too much
You're
of
like,
that.
stop it, Lou.
Yeah.
But do you guys not agree that it's not just clothes? I don't think fashion
I don't
is-
mean to, I didn't mean it like that.
I think some of
It's
the
not that
most
simple.
successful designers commercially are the first to admit, and Matthew always says, I'm not particularly conceptual. I always create clothes which have arms and shoulders and that women can actually wear, and therefore he does have a kind of gang of girls who adore his clothes. I do equally think there are other brands who you can say, the whole fashion is art conversation, we've had a lot on these panels, but I have a good quote for this. Eve said that fashion is more than art, it's craft, and it's like being an architect, because it's actually, you have to build something that is going to be lived in and it's worn. And I think that is an interesting difference perhaps, and when we do get too conceptual about the artistic concepts behind it, the point here and the reason perhaps we're all veering for just saying they're just clothes, they go down a runway, is because they are worn.
But do you not think that a concept can be worn is so much more interesting than a concept that just hangs on a wall? I think that's why fashion to me is so important.
Well, you can't make a dress out of a pile of bricks, so therefore it can't be art. You know what I mean? It's like, it's different.
But why,
it's a
just because
different
we
thing.
engage with it, is it not art? Just because it's kind of worn every day, why is it less important than something that's just static?
No, I don't want to wear a piece of art. I want to wear clothes.
But why does that lessen how important their sort of cultural... I'm not necessarily saying fashion's art, I'm just interested why people seem to find it so easy to say, you know, fashion isn't art because we wear it every day. And that it's seen as kind of somehow more... makes art more important, that people can't interact with it. It's less human. But I don't know why that makes fashion less...
I completely agree with you. But then saying that, I'm such a fan of seeing art in everything, in pop culture, in TV adverts, in like loads of crappy things. I look at and I think, it's kind of great. And I completely agree. I think, fashion is really, really culturally important. I think...
That almost qualifies as an art in itself, right? If it's that culturally relevant all the time, the building that goes into it.
But I think so many journalists are so pompous about art being like this thing, and fashion's not equal to that. And then I think it really shows its true colours when somebody dies, and like look at all the praise that people heap on McQueen since he sadly died, and people are almost raising everything he does now to be like high art. It's like, why couldn't it be that when he's alive? It's like, same with a lot of designers.
Do you think it is because there's a vanity aspect connected to it because, we wear it and it's expensive and it's... I don't know, I feel like that's somehow what brings it down. Or maybe it's because it's not criticised in the way that art is. I often think that with fashion because it's seen so much of more... with art there's proper criticism of art, and with fashion there's not in the same way.
There's so much criticism of fashion.
But I don't think... within the industry, it doesn't criticise itself as effectively as the art industry does. Do you think it does?
Yeah.
But I think there's so much more money in fashion. It's controlled by advertising in a way that just art isn't,
But the same with Hedi at Saint Laurent. It's like he was saying, he has a responsibility of this house from our side of things, or from the fashion press side of things. But he also has a responsibility that this is a very, this is a huge brand, and he has to deliver pieces that are going to sell. So he's got a commercial aspect to keep everybody in their jobs there, and to keep to keep this house alive. So it's this really like fine line of kind of if you go to conceptual, you're going to lose like elements that are potentially flattering. So there is a vanity side of fashion because all his pieces have to be flattering, on women to suit a multitude of women and girls. So it's always going to be about the body.
I think what Lou is saying is that we're not necessarily talking about conceptual fashion, just fashion in general. If somebody makes a nice skirt, why is it not considered art?
And
everyone's like,
artists have the same. Artists aren't in this kind of. They're not outside the commercial realm anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Matthew recently collaborated with Shane McAdams, who's a New York artist. He does these amazing landscapes. They worked together in the Spring/Summer 13 collection. But then Matthew also hosted an exhibition for him at Scream Art Gallery last month, and Shane there that evening was he needed to sell the pieces there. He was like, I've brought my family over from New York. He still has that commercial aspect, and I think you're a very lucky artist if you don't have to sell your pieces.
I think maybe saying is fashion art, that's such an old argument. I think it's been put out so much that people kind of shy away from it as we're all kind of doing things. Maybe it's not as simple as saying is fashion art, it's talking about cultural relevance, and I think everyone agrees that the art of a generation symbolises that generation. It's really important in letting us know about the society it was sort of created in. And that's quite an academic thing to put on art, but people don't do that of fashion in the same way. People kind of think fashion is throwaway and frivolous, but to me I think fashion more than art is symbolic of the culture that produced it, because people interacted with it.
Right.
And I think especially now, given how the high street sort of rips off high fashion, this will influence everyone, whether they realise it's influencing them or not. I know that sounds very like Devil Wears Prada, like this blue means that. Do you know this will, like girls who have no idea who Hedi, Slimane or Saint Laurent will try on pieces influenced by this collection.
We'll be wearing a lipstick print.
Exactly, and I think that's so much more important of saying something of a society than art is. But I don't know why fashion.
But I don't think this feels precious. I think this just feels like great clothes put together in a cool way, and that's what it's. I don't think it's coming across as fashion trying to be art.
But I don't think this is the argument. I think the argument is, how can like an architect build a building and people refer to it as like, oh, it's art, it's so amazing, and you know, a painter do a painting, it's art, whatever. But why can't somebody make something really beautiful that you can wear? And why can't that be art?
Yeah.
And also people pick and choose when they refer to fashion as art. So Com might be art and Junior might make art,
no,
you know,
agree.
and then it's suddenly like, but that can't be art. So it's
But why?
But that, no, I don't think that, but I do know what I mean. People,
council house can't be art,
Totally,
but you know, Zaha,
But I don't think that's
building
true. People have made great council blocks that refer
Exactly.
to
yeah,
as art.
but that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Like, so then people would say that the Com is art, you know, or something.
I
A
think it's the
liar
more
is like.
accessible it is, so the more maybe.
But that's no more expensive. I mean, that, you know, some Saint Laurent pieces are just as expensive as Comme des Garçons. You know, you can get a diffusion Comme des Garçons on anything.
But I mean,
you can
accessible
buy
in
into
terms
so
of it
much.
looks more accessible. I could look at that and
Yeah,
go
I guess
home.
so. But that's what I mean.
I wouldn't say this is art. These are clothes.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't.
Hussein Chalain doing a table as a dress may be art. I don't know.
But do you not think culturally some things have so much impact?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we
I
look
do
for culturally
completely
That
agree.
they should transcend
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
boundaries.
maybe we shouldn't say art. Maybe we say
It's
cultural.
culturally
cultural,
significant
yeah, that's
things.
right.
So
Yeah.
we're looking in. Would this collection in 10 years' time, would we look at that photo and think, yes, that summed up the time just like that art piece did, that building did? And I think certainly a lot of pieces from his first three collections could.
So it's almost like the terminology of the word art.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Yeah.
actually not correct. That's when it gets sort of overlooked and people get a bee in their bonnet about saying it's not art, that's not art, but actually culturally relevant, interesting, you know.
But I think I do think fashion's more culturally significant than art.
Completely.
Ooh.
I completely agree.
More
Do you
people
not
have
That's-
access to
I think
it.
that's a really brave statement
I think it
just
is
to
though,
make.
because I don't know. Maybe I just think because people interact with it more, and it's the ultimate personal expression,
And everybody wears clothes.
and I think it's because the people that write about art, they're incredibly educated and privileged, in a way that people who interact with this collection. It will be.
Unlike the people that write about fashion.
No. I'm not saying write about fashion, but I mean art doesn't touch as many people. I definitely don't mean that. I mean art doesn't touch as many people. Like the people who live in that art
But
world.
to be realistic about it.
Fashion writers love an art reference, don't they? They
Yeah,
love something that sounds
absolutely.
really clever.
Yeah,
and the more
you're reading the
obscure,
press
the
release like,
better.
But we like to
God.
pretend that fashion is this closed world, but it's not. You know, the fashion community is as lofty and as privileged as the art community is, definitely.
But it's
then-
it's that old phrase, isn't it? The art world always wants to be as cool as the fashion world, and the fashion world always wants to be taken as seriously as the art world.
But the difference is everyone will interact with this. I think that's the
But
difference
what do
between
you know? What it's everybody references everybody, because you're saying about fashion having an influence on everybody, and fine art being kind of aloof, and only certain people can interact with that. But fashion is referencing. He's probably referenced things from fine art, so it's actually having a trickle down effect. Because any designer or any fashion student. I remember this when I was at St Martin's. It's like if you ever reference fashion, it's like a huge big no-no, and they'd always be like reference some fine art. It's always that. So there's elements you could say that this is reference from art. So actually it's arts.
Like Saint Laurent doing the Mondrian dress.
Yeah,
Picasso.
Yeah.
But then do you think Eddie would say like
But that's using art.
Debbie
It's
Harry
not
was his
being
art?
Yeah, I
Like,
think
is that what
he's
he
more
said? That was
music,
his,
yeah.
you know.
I don't know what.
So what is
I
that?
think.
Is that like
I'm very
is
confused.
that a Liechtenstein print? Shall I try and be really clever?
Yeah, exactly. Pop art.
I just think it worries me that people are so keen to be like, oh, fashion's not art, because I think it's a difficult argument, and art's the wrong word. But I think as soon as we kind of accept that, it makes people be able to other fashion and belittle fashion when they shouldn't. Like it's so important. It has such a huge impact. Like every girl style will have changed because of Hedi Slimane. Whether they're buying Primark or Zara, like their style will have
Do you
been
really
affected.
think that?
But I
If
think
you
the
walk into
problem-
Zara, it's Saint Laurent everywhere, and no matter what what you can afford.
Is it really?
Yeah, completely. Like absolutely. Like I was in there the other day. It's almost laughable. There's like a whole back section of the store just up by Knightsbridge Tube Station that is literally the Saint Laurent collection. And I think people love to talk about fashion as being really exclusive, but it's a bad thing that the high street can rip it off so easily, but it's not exclusive. This will touch how every 13 or 14-year-old or 15-year-old dresses. And to me, that is so much more exciting.
I think it's great.
But I think not even how they dress. I think how they think about they want to dress.
Yeah.
What they aspire
And that's
to.
what makes it more interesting, not actually
But
the physical
because of-
pieces, but what they're thinking about in general.
Whereas like Banksy won't, and we love to say that Banksy's like cool, but no.
I think this is a really inclusive look as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I think women and young girls from all walks of life would find things in this that they wouldn't wear.
I think the problem is also because of the supposed superficiality of the fashion industry, some women who are perhaps intellectual art world women like to think that they are above the world of fashion, and they just say, oh no, I just wear what I want to wear and I'm not influenced by the trends or by the seasons. And that's what happens.
They still know what they're wearing.
And that's exactly what she says in The Devil Wears Prada, and I think some people feel they're a little bit above and aloof from it all, but actually they are not, like you were saying.
Everyone wears clothes,
exactly.
which goes back to this clothes
and
thing,
everyone decides the statement they want to make first thing in the morning.
Even if it's I don't want to make a statement, which is as important as wanting to make a statement.
I think what's really interesting is that we all walked into this discussion today thinking, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this collection. And I think now collectively we've all agreed this collection is going to touch everybody.
But that's actually, I think that's a really good way to sum up, because it is. I think he's so important, whether you like it, whether you hate it, whether you hate his...
deny it.
I'm really superficial, and I'm just noticing that they've always got their hands in their pockets with their thumbs outside in all his shows, including the men's.
Because they look cool.
And I'm not thinking about anything to do with art.
Yeah. That's how you should walk out, right?
No, I'm doing it now. So I'm being influenced by it.
Exactly.
So there you go.
It's touching lives.
But I'm just like this. I'm just like the airhead stylist. So there you go.
You're not an airhead. Well, thank you so much, guys. I feel like this has provoked as much debate as it will provoke Zara rip-offs. So brilliant. Thank you.